class, welcome to today's segment whereby we are going to be discussing tips and tricks on how to handle different question types in the reading test. So let us get right into it. But before we begin, it is very important to note that no strategy is set on stone. As much as we give different tips and tricks in different modules, in practicing, you will realize that a certain strategy works best for you. And that strategy might not be the same strategy as your friend's strategy, as your tutor's strategy. So the more you practice, the more you realize which strategy works best for you. So no strategy is set in stone. These are just guidelines to help you know which strategy would work best for you. So you practice until you get what best suits you. And then, as we said previously, you practice first until you learn to get the correct answers, and then you practice until you get to know the correct answers on time. So that is our main strategy in reading. So let us begin. In matching head questions are the questions whereby your passage, and as we all know, your passage has different paragraphs. It might have like 5 paragraphs, 4 paragraphs, 6 paragraphs. So matching head questions are questions whereby you are required to give each paragraph a heading. So you are presented with many headings, and then from those headings you are supposed to choose which heading best suits paragraph 1, which heading best suits paragraph 2, which heading best suits paragraph 3. So that is what we are discussing at the moment. Begin with these types of questions first, as they help you peruse through the whole passage while still answering questions. So once you have come to answer a particular passage, the first thing we said is to peruse the whole passage within 1 minute. But before you peruse, it is also important for you to take a glimpse into the questions required for that passage. And if you come across a question that needs you to give heading to each paragraph, then in this case you will not first peruse the passage. You will peruse the passage while answering this question that is asking you to give headings of the paragraphs in the passage. So what you'll do, you will go to paragraph 1, carefully read it. As you read it, you find the appropriate heading from the headings listed. Secondly, go to paragraph 2, do the same thing. By the end of it, you will have answered that particular question, and you will have also perused through the passage. So it is a win-win. But in the case that there's no such kind of question, then you will just peruse through the passage within 1 minute. Hope you've understood. Read the paragraph to understand, and answers should be directly pointed from the passage, and you can explain why that's the answer. So by the time you give a certain answer as the heading to a paragraph, you should be able to clearly point out why this is the heading of that paragraph. Like if I ask you, for example, Anne, why is this the answer to this? Why is this the heading to this paragraph? You should be able to explain to me, this is the answer to this paragraph because, and not only that, you should also be able to explain to me, I didn't choose answer A, I didn't choose answer C, I didn't choose answer D, I didn't choose answer A because of this and this, and that is why I chose answer B. You should be able to give an explanation to your answer, and also an explanation as to why the other answers are not correct. And you do that for every matching match heading question. And sometimes you might realize that I am not really sure if this is the answer to this paragraph. You can place a note, a star to that question, still input the answer, and then go to the next question. And by the time you come to the end of that section of match heading, you will identify the answers where you placed a star and review them to see if you can, maybe there's some headings you need to exchange, but that is after you have already placed an answer to all the headings. And then after that, what you start is what you're going to review right there and then. For these kinds of questions, do not leave the starred questions for the end of the test. After the 60 minutes is when you're going to come to review that paragraph or that question. For these types of questions, just finish with them right there and then, because they're not very complex. Yes. Next type of questions is true, false, not given. So these kind of questions are whereby you are given a statement and then you are required to say if this statement is either true according to the passage, if this statement is false according to the passage, or if this statement is not given according to the passage. So for true, for an answer to be true, ensure that you can literally point out the answer in the passage, either in paraphrased, synonym, or direct form. I think this is a statement you've heard me mention a couple of times, whereby you should be able to point out the answer from the passage literally. You can underline this is the answer and explain it. And this is very important, whereby you are putting true as your answer. For an answer to be true, there should be no doubt as to why this answer is correct. So if the question states something like China Square sells books, in the passage you should find a statement that exactly states that China Square sells books, or a statement that says something like when you go to China Square you will be able to purchase stationery such as books, pens, and biros. You get what I mean? There should absolutely be no doubt that this information is given in the passage. Yes. For an answer to be false, you should directly point out a contradicting information or statement in the passage. So, whereby you've been given a statement as the question, and then you are required to answer if this statement is true, false, or not given. For you to say that this statement is false, you should be able to go to the passage, point out information or a statement that exactly contradicts your statement. Whereby, for example, the statement you've been given as the question is something like Kenyatta University admits only medical students. The question statement is Kenyatta University only admits medical students. But when you go to the passage, you see something like Kenyatta University admits all kinds of students, including medical students, engineering students, education students. You see, this statement in the passage is a completely contradictory information, gives contradictory information, whereby in this passage it's all admits all, but in your question it admits only medical students. You see, this is a directly contradicting information. So in this scenario, you're going to place false as your answer. So false is only placed when you can identify information in the passage that completely contradicts the question statement. Have you understood me? I hope so. For an answer to be not given, you should not be able to point out directly any information that answers to your question. Please do not force an answer to be false when it is not given. So there's usually a very tricky scenario whereby most candidates usually confuse not given with false, and vice versa. They confuse false with not given. So for your statement to be not given, it should be when you go to your passage, you are not able to find any information about that statement given in your question. For example, your statement is something like, for example, your whole passage is talking about the Olympics, where the Olympics are held, where the Olympics will be held in future, where the Olympics have been held before. But your question statement states something like, Eliud Kipchoge won 100 meters last year. But when you go to the passage, there is no mention of Eliud Kipchoge. So in that scenario, the answer will be not given. But this example that I've given is quite an easy example. Mostly it's usually something very tricky, whereby there's a very fine line. You kind of wonder, actually, the moment you start making assumptions, just know your answer is probably not given. The moment you cannot go to your passage and identify and point out either a statement that supports that information given in your question, or either a statement in the passage that contradicts that statement in your question, when you find that you are overthinking or you are making assumptions from the passage, probably your answer is not given. The moment you just cannot go to the passage and underline, guys, if you cannot go to the passage and underline where this information is given, and you find yourself you are in a situation whereby you are overthinking, or maybe this information is given, probably the answer is not given. Let me think of a quick example. For example, in the passage they've said something like, Laura Mudeu is an A student. That is the statement in the passage. But in the question statement states something like, Laura Mudeu achieved, performed or scored a 99% in a mathematics test. So that is your question statement. But in the passage, they have just said Laura Mudeu is an A student. So when you get to your question, you wonder, but if she scored 99%, this statement is true, because in the passage they said she's an A student. But what you don't realize, the passage did not talk about 99% in mathematics. It just said she's an A student. So you see, in this scenario, you have begun overthinking. You see, 99% means A student, so probably this statement is true, or this statement is given, so it's true. So when you come to such a scenario whereby you have to dissect the question statement and make an assumption, probably that information is not given. And in the live sessions, we are going to really put a focus on true, false, not given kind of questions, because these question types are quite tricky for most candidates. But the more you practice, the more you get used to them, and they become easier with time. So true, not true, true, false, and not given type of questions are similar to yes, no, and not given types of questions, because yes means that the information is given, no means the information, yes means true, no means false, and not given means the same thing, it's not given. But always ensure, if your section has said that the answer should be true, false, and not given, never put your answers as yes, no, not given, and vice versa. Whereby you've been told to give your answers as yes, no, or not given, never confuse and put your answers as true, false, or not given, because that will be an automatic fail, even if your answers were correct. Because if you say true, it means that yes, the information is there, but the section didn't ask you to put true, they asked you to put yes, and vice versa. Okay. Most answers follow passage in descending order, but not all. So, you see, when you begin a passage, question 1 in regards to that passage will probably be in the top of that passage. Question 2 will probably follow below question 1, and so on and so on. But let me emphasize, this is not always the case. This is not always the case, and that's why for me in reading, I am still for the idea that for every question, just begin reading the passage from the top going downwards, until by the time you get halfway through the questions in regards to that passage, you will have already familiarized with the passage, so that when you just see the question, you know that I think the answer to this question is in paragraph 3. But by the time you get to that scenario, please just be reading from the top, because as much as they might say that the answers are in descending orders, sometimes they are not that way. And I don't want you to waste time going to paragraph 4, second guessing. You read paragraph 4, you realize the answer is not in paragraph 4. You go to paragraph 2, you read, as in just start from the top. That way you will have structure in your reading, and then it will be easier for you. But as I said earlier, there's no strategy that fits all. If by good luck you realize maybe your strategy is the one for just going and blindly reading the passages and you get the answer, good for you. But what I'd recommend is you just read from the top. You read, not peruse, you read. You realize passage 1 does not have the answer to that question. Passage 2 does not have the question to that answer. You find the answer to you find the answer in paragraph 3, paragraph 3. That way, you go to the next question. You begin from paragraph 1, you realize paragraph 1 does not have the answer. Paragraph 2 that has the answer. You go to the next question that way. By the time you get to the 5th question, you will have already have familiarized with the whole passage. In that, by the time you're in the 4th question, you don't really have to now go reading line by line in each paragraph. You'll just read a paragraph, you know that I think the answer is not here, you go next. But as I am talking about reading the paragraphs line by line, remember, it is speed reading, not perusing, but speed reading. Perusing is whereby you just read one statement, you might even jump the next statement and go to the other one after that. You are not keenly reading. That is what perusing means. But speed reading means you are reading each line, understanding it, but at a very fast pace. And this is where practice comes in line, because with practice you will be able to speed read. So practice makes perfect. Okay, the next question type is filling in the gaps. Filling in the gaps types of questions is whereby you are presented with a paragraph, but in that paragraph there are gaps that have not been filled. So what you're supposed to do is fill in the gaps with answers from the passage. Have you understood me? So for example, it's a paragraph, and then in the middle of the statement there's a blank space, and then a blank space after two statements, a blank space after two statements. So what you're supposed to do is go to the passage, read through it, and fill in the required words. Most of the times there's a list of words whereby you are supposed to use those list of words and fill it to the gaps in the paragraphs. But sometimes there's no list of words. You just go by yourself, read the passage, and find the right words to fill in the gaps. And from popular opinion, this is the easier kind of question in reading, the easier kind of question type in reading, because you actually do not even have to read the passage. You just read this paragraph, realize that this paragraph is in a certain section in the passage. You go to that section in the passage, and what you just have to do is to transfer the information from the passage to your gaps in your paragraph. Easy peasy. So it's very easy, this question type. But also, as much as we say it's easy, do not underestimate it, as in take it lightly. Yes. So after filling in the gaps, read the paragraph as a whole and make sure the tenses are right, the meaning is also right, and context makes sense. If it does not make sense, review your answers. So as I said, this is a paragraph you're presented with, and it has gaps whereby you're supposed to fill in the answers. So after you've filled in all your answers, please read through the paragraph now with the answers and make sure, one, the paragraph makes sense. The paragraph is in the right context, and the tenses of your answers are in line with the tenses of your paragraph. And if you realize that the paragraph, when you filled in the answers, does not make sense, then it is time to review your answers. You understand what I mean? I think this is self-explanatory. So yeah, do that for these kinds of questions. And if you get these kind of questions and you realize this is your stronghold, please go through this question type as fast as you can. This is to ensure that you save some time. This time you're going to use it in the question types you find more difficult. For example, if it's true or false question type, something like that. Yeah, or any other question type. I'll repeat this point I had already talked about before, and this is under any other business. Or alternatively, okay, let me just repeat. Some answers that you have filled but you are not sure, star them, and if time is left by the end of you doing the whole test, go back and review them. Guys, this is a very important note. As for me, in my main exam, if I just had the slightest doubt about an answer, I starred it. Okay, for me, I did computer based, so what I did, I just wrote the answers I need to review on my rough paper. So I was writing number 7, if I go on and then I realize number 12 I'm not very sure, I will write down number 12. By the end of the test, what I did, I just would go, I went back. Number 7, I realized that I think number 7 is right, number 12 is right. Number 14, I think number 14 I need to change, or I just need to read the passage again to ensure this is the correct answer. Starring a question or an answer does not mean that it's the wrong answer. It just means that you need to review. Remember, you need to ace your exam. So anywhere that you have any doubt, or anywhere that a mark can be lost, is somewhere that you should seriously consider reviewing. So even if you had for me, I would even start answers that I know are right, like I am 99% sure they are right, but there's just 1% doubt that they may not be right. So I start those answers. So, and later on I reviewed them and they were okay. And guys, leave at least 5 minutes to review all your answers, or to just go ensuring that you've answered all your questions. Because this legit happened to me. I was doing computer based, so I don't know what happened. I when I was reviewing my answers, I realized I had left out 2 questions, guys. I had skipped answering 2 questions, and by that time I think there was around, I'm not kidding you, around 3 or 4 minutes left. And then I realized I've skipped, like the way the computer based test is set up, you go clicking the next answer. So I think I got distracted, and that's why I tell you focus is very important in the exam. I got distracted, and then instead of clicking next, I think to date I don't know what really happened, but I assume that I clicked, for example, I was in number 10, so I clicked number 13, and I didn't realize, and number 13 was not related to number 11 and 12, so that's why I didn't realize. So, but once I realized my mistake, guess what? Because I was familiar with the passage, I just read that question, perused the passage within literally 1 minute, and by then I already knew the answer. Because as I keep repeating the strategy of reading your passage and understanding it, so that if something quite unfortunate like this happens to you, then you will not need time to remember what this passage was about, or your mind will quickly remember what the passage is about, and you'll be able to answer the question easier. So guys, this video has been quite long, but I'm very sure it's been resourceful. And yes, we've come to the end of the examples, and I feel the tackling of different question types, we will discuss it more on the live classes, because we'll be able to identify this is a certain question type and go through it together. Yes, and always remember, the trick in reading is identify your strongholds, speed reading, and always point out your answers from your passage. If you cannot point out your answer from your passage, it's probably the wrong answer. Okay guys, we are done with this class, and see you in our next class. Bye.